All right, we're here. Just got done one of the worst. You can't even call that a Smite game, but you know. Yeah. Gonna try to do something here. Um, Try to get some more games in for Bryce. I don't even know if he's watching these videos anymore at this point, but we can hope. It's currently 7:13 in the morning. Reason why I'm up is because I have to drive down to North Carolina in a couple days, and I won't be getting down there until like 11, like 10 to noon, somewhere around that time frame, depending on when I leave. So, um, I need to be awake while I'm driving down there, because like, we're looking ahead into the future a little bit. Like right now, I'm like on Saturday morning, I guess technically Saturday night, Saturday morning. Like right now, I'm like halfway there, and I am not trying to pull over to sleep. I just want to drive straight down, and not be tired. When I get down there, I'm gonna try my best to not fucking fall asleep and try to have a day of something. But if I have to nap for an hour or two, I have to nap for an hour or two. But figured I'd just get my sleep schedule ruined enough to where I can get down there without having to take a nap necessarily midway through. So that's why we're ruining our sleep schedule. And the only way I could really think of to stay up without being completely bored was to try to record some more of these videos. So that's why we're here. Um, it's just like, I mean, there's so many things to cover, and I feel like I've covered a lot sporadically, but like maybe going over like specific things would be more valuable rather than like a play-by-play. Cause I feel like I have enough games posted to where like Bryce can just cycle through them and get the general idea. Maybe I should try like, I don't know. I don't know. Like the fundamental understanding of the lane is the problem. Like farming is obviously a big problem. That's a big issue for sure. But I feel like Bryce just doesn't understand why certain gods are good against certain gods. Like, in fact, Bryce didn't know the difference between CC immunity and an ability being immune to a certain CC, like Juan used Tallow Assault. Like, that's a big problem. So, I guess we should go there. So, certain abilities in Smite, Bryce. Well, if an ability can do something, I would say 99.9% of the time it will tell you exactly what it does and what it is immune to. I'm sure there's a couple examples where, you know, the exact wording doesn't cover everything, but for 99%, if something is written down, that's exactly how that ability works. So, um, yeah, it's just I, I don't know how I can make the wording any simpler, but if it's written down, that's what it does, and it doesn't do anything fancy. Obviously, there's some things it could be doing fancy, but just to keep it simple, take everything at what it is and just work with it. All right. I'm actually low key kind of hungry. Before I start going too crazy. Alright. I know it's kind of an AFK there for a second, but I was already debating getting some food because I'm pretty fucking hungry. But we're gonna lock in. We're gonna lock back in. Alright. So again, just literally read the abilities. Like, especially for Cuchulainn, King Arthur, and Surtur, you should know exactly what they do without me even having to tell you. So, we're going to treat this like it's your first day playing Smite, and these were the first time you're playing these gods. So, let's read it as a class, shall we? Cuchulainn's passive, Berserk. This is where he does not have any mana in his kit. This is his rage. But let's read what Berserk does, because it does a lot more than just get rid of mana and give us rage. Cuchulainn's mana, MP5, and mana heals are applied to his health pool. Basically, the way you got to think about it, Bryce, is mana equals health on Cuchulainn, and MP5, mana per 5 seconds, equals HP5, health per 5 seconds. So, anything, so like say you build Breastplate of Valor and you get 200 health, that'll now be 20% of 200, which is 40. So you'll get 40 health off that 200 mana because you're losing the mana on that stat of Breastplate of Valor, which feels bad, but at least it's converting a little bit into health for you. So let's keep going. Abilities consume rage, which stops regen at 25. So how it works is there's two big numbers on Cuchulainn that you have to understand for rage: 25 and 85. If you are below 25 rage, Cuchulainn will passively regen rage back up to 25. That way you can use your abilities without having to auto attack something or take damage from something. So he will passively regen you up to 25, but not any higher. So I can get to 25, he will not just passively gain rage anymore, which I'm sure you've noticed that you don't get rage, but you actually do if you're under 25, which is something important to know in case you get low on rage somehow. But he gains rage upon hitting with his abilities, as well as one rage per for auto attacks, and half rage when he or allies take damage. Now this is something I didn't even know until a responder told me about it like a month or a couple weeks ago. But you actually gain rage for your allies taking damage, which I didn't know. Obviously, I'm sure there's like a range on it. The range, it doesn't specify, which it should. But basically what you have to understand is for every auto attack you deal, you gain one rage. And every time you take damage, you gain half a rage. So that includes minion shots, any source of damage. Any source, whether you're hitting a camp, minions, enemy gods. Anytime you take damage, you'll gain half a rage, including allies, which is weird. I'm assuming it's the auto attack range, which is 55. So anyone within auto attack range, I'm assuming you get half rage for. After 2 seconds above 85, you go berserk. So when you're at 85 rage, that's when your body starts going crazy. And I'm pretty sure Cuchulainn says like, "Here we go," and that's when he's getting ready to rage. But you have 2 seconds, which means you can, if you want to, you can use an ability to lose rage. So like your one, for example, it costs 9 rage. So say you're at 85 and you don't want to rage out yet, you can just throw your one out. Obviously, you're putting it on cooldown, but you're delaying your rage so that you can actually rage out when you want to, which is something you can do with Cuchulainn, especially since you're not gonna have your 2 till later in the game. This allows you to like manually control your rage if you don't have your 2 yet, which you shouldn't until like level 13 or 14. I forget what it is. I think it's 14, but regardless. While berserk, Cuchulainn gains power and a health shield. So let's just read what you get. 20% of your mana converts to health. We talked about that earlier. Berserk threshold. We talked about that. Berserk duration 20 seconds, which is a pretty long time. Bonus health, which is your shield, your health shield. It starts at 20, but you get 20 per level. So At level 1, so let's say level 2, it would be 20 times 2. So when you get to lane and you rage out for the first time, it's 20 times 2. So it's 40. Just because it's 20 per level. So 20 at 1, 20 at 2. 20 times 2 is 40. Plus 20, so you're 60. So when you get to lane, you have whatever health you have with the items you built, plus 60 health off the rage from your passive. That's why Cocoon's strong, because 60 health in the early game is like an auto attack, and it's like an auto and a half, 2 autos, which is very strong. Because just off base, you essentially have an extra 2 autos of health to play off of compared to the other person, and that's also not accounting for the AOE damage you're dealing with your 2 when you're in, because when you're in your berserk mode, your rage form, this form, it automatically applies your 2. So like, even though you don't have this leveled, when you're in rage, like let's say levels 1 to 13 before you have this ability leveled up, you're dealing 10 damage per tick. I'm not sure if you get the movement speed. That I'm unsure of. But actually, this is another thing. I didn't even know Cocoon got movement speed from his 2. Again, the point of Smite is to get like the 90% understanding of what a character can do and being able to play around it. Like, get the general idea. But if you're supposed to main a character, that is on your responsibility to know what it should do, all that. And even then, for characters I play, you would probably tell me what an ADC does, and I probably don't know. Because again, I'm looking at big picture stuff. And when you're playing a game with 130 characters, it can be hard at times if you don't play that character often or it's not in your role. It's hard to know everything they do to the minute details. So, this is when maining a character and being in that role, you're a specialist, allows you to have information over other people that they might not know. And this is something I did not know. I did not know Cocoon got movement speed off his 2. I didn't. Maybe that's me being a bronze player, and I should know it, but I did not know it. And on top of that, with your passive, you gain 2 bonus power per level, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're level 20, you're getting 40 power in Berserk, which is essential. Like, let's just look at items. Power? What's 40 power? It's like having a Shadow Drinker or a Blood Forge. Like, that's like having a Jotuns. Obviously, you don't have the pen, which makes a big difference, but that's essentially like having like a Frostbound Hammer power levels just by going Berserk. Just to give you an idea, obviously that's level 20, but this might not seem like a lot, but that is a lot. That is a lot of bonus power you're getting. So, yeah, that's just his passive we went over. And it's already giving you a lot of stuff. So let's get into his other abilities. Cohen thrusts his spear forward, damaging all enemies in front of him and stunning less powerful minions. So basically, if it's a minion wave and you throw your spear, it stuns them, meaning that they can't shoot you, which is good, because if minions can't hit you or hit your minions, that means it gives you time in your minions to clear and deal damage to them, gives you pressure, etc., etc. So just off these 2 abilities alone, we can see why Cocoon is a very strong early game character, because you have your Rage form, which resets your cooldowns. That it doesn't say, but you know, you see it in game. So you basically have 2 sets of cooldowns, off just being in lane, and you can stun minions, and you have all this. So right off the bat, just with his first 2 abilities, we see already why Cocoon is considered a very early game aggression solo laner. Pretty obvious. Successfully hitting an enemy minion with an ability to source 5 rage, 8 for a god, to a max of 18. So, this is just, maxing it out just makes it so you're not immediately stacking like 50 rage off like a minion wave and a god, because that would be way too OP. Barbs from his spear stick in opponents, reduce their healing receipts for 5 seconds, healing reduction 40%. Just to give you an idea, I believe Brawlers and Divine are also at 40% anti-heal. So this is essentially like having Brawler's Beat Stick baked into your 1, which is, again, very, very strong, because healing is super prevalent in Smite. A lot of characters do it. It is very, very important to be able to negate it in some way, and having it baked into your kit is a very strong form. In his Berserk form, Cocoon instead slams his massive arms down, damaging and rooting all enemies in front of him, and this ability costs no rage, because again, you're in your Berserk form, which in your Berserk form, your abilities do not cost rage. So, damage, 80 plus 55. Scaling's a little low, but Warrior scaling is typically low. Warrior base damage is typically higher than other classes, just because again, their scaling's low, and that's how they make up for it, is by having higher base damage. Stun duration, 2 seconds in stun. Oh, the stun on the minions duration. Okay, that makes sense. Stunning minions for 2 seconds is very strong. I did not know it was that long. Root duration, 1 second, because it's the 1.4. Cooldown, again. We move on. Cocoon vents his anger as a superheated steam, increasing his movement speed and draining his rage. Every half second while in this state, all enemies within the range are damaged from the heat. Vent anger does not return rage. In his Berserk form, Cocoon vents anger automatically and does not drain rage. And it's pretty self-explanatory. Really, the only thing that I noticed was the movement speed. I did not know this ability gave movement speed, so I'm learning something myself by reading this. Cocoon, the Salmon Leap is literally just a leap. It's not anything too crazy. Just, again, telling you how much rage you get per minion, how much you get a god, and max. Yeah. His ult. Cohen swings his spear around in a circle, damaging, knocking up all enemies. Successfully hitting enemy minion with his abilities for Send Rage, 26 for god. This is why you gain a lot of rage off your ult, because all your other abilities have a cap of 18, your ult has a cap of 36, which means it allows you to get in your Berserk form very quick. In his Berserk form, Cocoon gives off a terrifying yell, damaging all enemies and causing them to tremble. This is very niche crowd control in Smite. It costs no rage and has a 35-second cooldown. Now, Tremble. What is that? You've seen it a little bit with your ult, but its Tremble again is a very niche CC in Smite. The best example of Tremble in Smite that you'll instantly recognize is Kabrakan. His 3 is just a giant tremor. So as we'll see watching this video, tremor is this action right here where Ymir is like going, obviously this is a bit older, this is on like Kabrakan first release, so it looks a little different. But tremor is like when it causes them to go back and forth and like they can't move where they want. That's tremor. So that's why when you ult, they like kind of stand still for a second. It's because they're tremored for like a second or two, preventing them to move where they want for a little bit. And it's literally a second. So this is Cocoon's kit. A lot of it is really baked into the passive in the 1. The rest of it is pretty simple. It also gives you the radius and range of your leap, which is important because not all leaps are the same. Cocoon's leap is a bit smaller at 35. When you compare that to some of the other leaps in the game, like Gilgamesh, his leap is actually 55, an entire auto attack. So he can Gilgamesh's leap is a bit longer, and it goes 20 more units, which is big. Is there other leaps that we can look at? Nike, what's her leap at? 55. So again, a lot of the leaps are auto attack distance, which is 55. Again, these numbers are kind of hard to know. You're really only going to memorize these numbers if you're like a nerd and you play for a while and you play comp. But basically, this is why Cocoon's leap feels shorter than others, is because it literally is. You're 20 units shorter than a lot of the other leaps in the game. But again, his leap is really just to avoid damage for a second or to get in. It's not really about escaping or full engaging. It's kind of just like, oh, I'm about to take a lot of damage, or I need to avoid something, let me leap over it, deal damage, get my rage up. You know what I mean? So, that's that. Let's read Surtur. What do we got for Surtur? He's a newer god, so we gotta go over the fucking god fucking shit. Alright. Surtur's flesh cracks into fragments after he loses enough health. Picking these up, Surtur gains a percentage of his max health over time and protections for 3 seconds. Max 3 stacks. Enemies can destroy these fragments by walking over them. Now, I'm not sure if you knew this, because again, a lot of the time people aren't going to play around your passive, but they can actually destroy your fragments if they walk over them. Now, counterplay is when you pop your 3, which we'll get to in a second, your 3 automatically picks up your passive fragments. If you don't know what I'm talking about for whatever reason, the fragments that the passive is alluding to... Alright, well, it's not working. Classic Hyras. Alright, here we go. These little rocks are your passive, which I'm assuming you know. But on the off chance you didn't, that's your passive. The rocks around you is showing that you're healing off your passive. Yeah. Those meteors that you drop, if they walk over them, they can cancel it, which is a little... That's like a micro mind play that they can do. A lot of the time, it's not worth it, because again, especially with your 3, you pick it, your 3 will collect it for you manually, so a lot of the time it's not really something they can play around, but it is something to note. And you heal per tick 6.6% of your health per tick for 3 seconds. So for each rock, let's just do some math. 0.6% per tick. 3 seconds. Does it tick once per second? Or does it tick 0.5? That's a good question. Usually ticks are, I'm assuming it's just going to be a second, so 0.6 times 3 is a percent, and 1.8% times 3. So just from your passive alone, you're healing about 5.5% of your max health from the rocks, which is pretty strong. 5% of your health passively just healing up is pretty strong, considering it's just a passive. You also get protections, so by picking up the rock, you get 6 plus 1 per level. So again, if we're talking about max level, you're getting, what, 26 prots of each, which is very strong. That's basically half an item or an item. If it was just one type of protection, it would say physical protection or magical, but since it just says protections, it means both magical and physical. So you're getting 6 plus 1 per level of both physical and magical. It's very strong. And your health threshold for your fragments to spawn is 15%. So once you take 15% of your health or more in damage, that's when your meteors will start to spawn. 1. Flames of Muspel. Muspel, however you pronounce it. Surtur sets his sword ablaze, gaining haste. What does haste do? Haste makes it so your auto attacks do not have a auto attack penalty. So when you look at items like Haste and Fatalis and Haste and Katana previously, that's why they are very strong. Those items are good on certain characters like Kali, Freya, Bakasura, because it allows them to auto attack without having to sacrifice their movement speed. So while you have your 1 active, you have haste on your next, before you hit your next auto attack with your 1. Last 5 seconds. So you have a 5-second window to hit someone with your 1, and if you don't, you're just running around for 5 seconds with, you know, no auto attack penalty, which is whatever. And when you hit someone, it spawns to the fiery imp that you see. Stability bonus damage increases per stack, max of 999, basically just infinitely stacking, because it's basically going to be impossible to fully stack his sword. Surtur gains 1 stack when hitting an enemy, or 3 if the enemy is a target god. Surtur also gains 2 stacks when killing an enemy god, or killing an enemy, or 5 if the target is a god. Basically what this is saying is, for each stack, you get, just by hitting an enemy, which enemies are classified as anything that is not on your team. So any minion, any jungle camp, that's an enemy. So anytime you hit a minion with your 1, you get 1 stack, but you get 3 per god hit. So you're incentivized to use your 1 on gods to stack it more, get more damage up, all that jazz. But if you kill an enemy with it, you get 2, so you're doubling your stacks, or you get 5. So obviously, it's gonna... This is something that just kind of happens. You don't really like play for it necessarily, but if you do kill someone with your 1, you get 5 stacks of your passive up for your 1, which is good, because again, Surtur is the only god in Smite 1, I believe, that deals physical and magical damage, which is something very unique. Not even sure if you knew that, but yes, Surtur does deal physical and magical, and it's literally just off his sword. We'll read here. Damage per tick, yada yada yada. Bonus damage off your 1, 35 plus 1 per stack. So let's say you have 30 stacks. You're dealing 65 magical damage off your 1, which is a decent amount considering you're a physical character. And your lane opponent, they're just building physical defense. If you start getting your stacks up a little bit, that 1 is going to hurt a lot because, again, they are incentivized to build physical defense because you were Surtur. But this gives you a little bit of leverage over them because you're dealing magical also. So there's also that. Imp damage, imp health, yada yada yada. That's important. Really, the big thing about the 1 is stacking how many stacks you get per hit on who and when. And also realizing it deals magical damage, which is very important. Just going to throw this out there now. You are never building Void Demario on Surtur. If I see that, I am reporting you. But just a cool thing they added for Surtur, giving him magical damage. Very cool. Giant's Grasp. Surtur grabs the closest target next to him, either an enemy lane minion or a fiery imp or magma rock, if neither are in range. Basically, you can pick up the enemy minions to throw at them. If you have your minion from your 1, you can pick that up. Or if none of those are around you, you'll just grab a rock, which is what you'll see. This is just, you know, what you see. But the big specification here is what each do. So Magma Rock just stops on first enemy. So if you have just a Magma Rock, it'll just get hit on a minion. Stops on first enemy, which is a minion, all that. That's why when you have the rock, it feels bad because they can hide in their minion wave when you just have a rock, and you can't hit them because it'll hit on first enemy, which kind of sucks. But if you pick up a lane minion, it passes through minions, stopping on first enemy god. This is very specific wording. First enemy god, which means if you pick up one of their lane minions, you can actually throw it through their entire wave, deal damage to everything, and also stun them at the same time. So the goal is always to try to pick up a minion. Always to try to pick up a minion, because it allows you to deal more damage, because you're dealing all this damage to all the minions, and you have the potential to stun someone. But the best is Fire Imp. Passes through all minions, stepping on first enemy god, and exploding in an area. So obviously, you want to try to combo your 1 with your 2, because that's what it's intended to do. If you can't, try to get a lane minion. Worst case scenario, you're fighting in the jungle and your 1's on cooldown, you have no imp around you, and you just need a stun, use your Magma Rock. But this is kind of the order here. You want to try to aim for your imp. If you can't have an imp, try to get a minion. If you can't get a minion, and you just need the stun, it's whatever. But you always want to try to combo off your 1 or try to use the lane minions to your advantage. Again, you can see why these characters, we tell you these characters are very early game and you just kind of take it as face value. But now reading these, you see why. And I don't even know if you've noticed why your stun gets body blocked at times. It's because of this. It literally tells you right here, the rock stops on first enemy, minion and imp, they go through. But with imp, it also deals fire damage, which it explains here. This is the base damage, this is what it will do if you have Magma Rock, Lane Minion, or Fire Imp. But if you have Fire Imp, this is the AoE damage that it's talking about on the exploding. Stun duration, all that, yada yada. Yeah, this is really a big thing right here, because I'm not sure if you even knew this, Bryce, but this is a very big distinction. This is very important stuff that you need to know. This is stuff that's so just baked into the kit that, like, people like me, Akivo, people that have played the game for a while and play solo, this is something they just intuitively know, because number one, we were around at the time when Surtur first came out, so like when they were talking about it on the patch notes show, this is something that they said, and we just internalized it immediately. But on top of that, it's just one of those things where, like, we know where we're like, if you're struggling to play Surtur and you don't understand why, this might be one of the things you're not understanding. And this is one of those things where, like, it's hard for us to know what's going wrong, because this is just one of those things where, like, we just intuitively know that we expect you to know because you're playing Surtur. But I'm not even sure if you knew about these rock and minion differences, but now you do because you were, hopefully you're watching this video. which again, something that we just know that you don't, which is very, pretty important stuff. Ember Walk. This is your 3, the giant circle around you. This thingy right here. Surtur's Fury creates a ring of embers around him, providing a movement speed buff that increases for hitting enemies while the ability is active. The ring deals damage to those enemies once it expands or when fully formed again when it contracts. While formed, the outer ring deals continuous damage to enemies inside. The ring also picks up obsidian flesh fragments, which is your passive. Pretty much, it's telling you deal damage with it. Not a lot, but you deal damage. And you gain movement speed. You get 10% plus 5% enemy hit, max 3 stacks. So if you're hitting 3 enemies with your 3 or more, you're gaining 25% movement speed because you have to base 10% plus 5% per enemy. 10 plus 15, 25%, which is very strong. But it also slows them, which is something I didn't even know. I did not know that Surtur 3 also slowed. It's not a big slow, 15% isn't the biggest, but when you're comparing it to your movement speed buff plus their slow, it creates a pretty big speed dynamic that you have over them, which is very, very good for you. Again, I didn't even know that this slowed. I just knew that it gave a movement speed. I did not know that this slowed. Because again, the slow doesn't feel hard because it's not a big slow, but again, when you're comparing the differences, because let's say you're only hitting one person, 15% plus a 15% slow, you essentially have 30% movement speed over them, which is a very, very big difference. Like, 30% is a massive speed tier difference, and you having this, plus getting your immediate heal off this is why Surtur's very early game god, because you're dealing magical damage, and your 1 just hurts a lot, just has very good damage on it. You have a stun that can actually deal damage through the entire minion wave and cannot be body blocked. A lot of stuns in the game that are like this, where you throw a projectile, it actually, like, they can be body blocked by minions at times. I'm trying to think of one. Circuit Taunt, that, like, those projectiles that she throws, those can get body blocked by minions, which makes it very hard for Circuit to gank people that play in the minion wave, because they can hide through the taunt. But with Surtur, if you have a minion or an imp, you can just go through it, just power through it. And on top of all of that, just basically just brute your strengthening through everything. You're passively healing with your 3 with your passive, and you have a huge movement speed disparity, which is big. That's your result. After a short build up, Surtur surges into the air and fusing into a large meteor. While in the air, Surtur's immune to damage and can choose where to come crashing down. Before landing, meteor split off, targeting enemies on the ground, doing damage to 20 fire imps. Surtur's meteor also deals increased damage and knocks up enemies hit. Pretty much pretty basic. It's just saying you go up, immune to damage, you come down, you hit people, you knock them up. Basically what it's saying. And then this is just the damage numbers. So yeah, that's that. Weird that this doesn't have a video, but whatever. Those are the 2 characters that we've gone over. I've learned 2 things. Surtur 3 slows, which I did not know before, and Cocolin 2 gives movement speed, which again, I did not know. So let's read King Arthur, because I'm sure I'm going to learn something off King Arthur, because his kit is always changing. Here we go. Steadfast. Passive. Each ability that damages the god results in a stack of Steadfast, reducing damage taking and increasing energy gain. Energy is how you get your sword. Energy is how you get your passive, your ult to go from baby bitch stun to giant Giga Chad, like knock up. Each time King Arthur uses an ability, he swaps between his standard and combo abilities. All abilities are instant cast. So that's why King Arthur can be kind of hard for newer players at times, because again, he doesn't have the option of doing normal cast or quick cast. It's all instant. Attack speed does not benefit his basic attacks, because again, King Arthur is the only god in Smite that doesn't have auto attacks. I guess technically Gabake Kujira can't build auto attack speed, but King Arthur, it gets converted. Oh, I guess it's both. So yeah, I guess Bake counts too now. But regardless, King Arthur for a long time was the only god in Smite that did not work with auto attack or attack speed. All abilities are instant cast. We already read that. Basic attacks increase his energy gain. So for whatever reason, if you decide to build, that's why sometimes you'll see Troll attack speed King Arthur builds, is because it actually gives him conversion on his passive to give him more energy. Again, not something you'd ever do if you're actually trying to win, but let's just say hypothetically you have a support that has Shogun's Kusari on your team. Instead of getting nothing out of it, you get a little bit of attack speed conversion again. Not the biggest deal in the world, but it's just a neat little thing that they added to him just because, again, he didn't get anything off attack speed. Damage mitigation 2.5% per stack. Max stacks of 3, so you can technically get 2, so I guess 3 times 3, 9 minus 1, so like 7.5. 7.5% damage mitigation, which is a lot, just off of passive especially. That's not even considering any items you could build. That's a lot of damage mitigation. Energy, 20% per stack. 3 stacks, you get 60% bonus energy gain off your passive when you deal damage or anything, yada yada. Attack speed conversion, duration 10 seconds. So your passive, very good. It's a very good passive. This is one of the better passes in Smite. It's pretty good. The standard. The standard is the blue. Okay, so that's okay. So standard is your blue abilities. Combo is your red. Okay. Standard King Arthur slash overhead. Enemies hit by the melee strike take damage bonus from the slicing attack. Combo, which is the orange. King Arthur swipes low, crippling and damaging enemies. Again, this is something that is not very... I know for sure this is not something you play around, because a lot of newer players don't think about this, but in your red stance, when you have that giant slash... Here, I guess we'll see the video to see if they show it. So this slash right here... Fuck, just do the combo one. Do the red one. Alright, well, you know what slash I'm talking about. The red one where it slashes across, it cripples. So, cripples, what do cripples do? Cripples, so roots make it so people physically cannot move. When they click W on their keyboard, they will not move. But they are allowed to move with movement abilities. That's the thing with roots. They're rooted in place, but they're not movement restricted. Cripples, on the other hand, they are allowed to move with WASD. They are not allowed to use movement abilities. So, what that means is with King Arthur, if you wait for someone to dash, like let's say Amaterasu, so you play a little bit, since you play a little bit Amaterasu. Obviously, Ama kind of fucks King Arthur, so maybe that's the best example. Let's say Agni. Agni dash. It's a very iconic dash in Smite. If you use your one while Agni's like if you predict his dash and you dash him and you hit him with your one, not only will it cancel his dash because his dash is not cripple immune, it'll also put on cooldown. You'll catch his dash, and now he's taking damage. Catch his dash because he's crippled. Something you should and have to play around in his kit because it is a very, very important. Like, the cripple on his one is super strong because it's the range is pretty large and it's pretty easy to hit. So, again, and with King Arthur especially, this, like, his cripple is not something that people think about when they use beads. Like, when people get hit by King Arthur just expecting damage, they don't really consider the CC. Even really high-end players, I'm telling you, they do not think about, like, I guess if we're talking like actual pros and SEC players, like, yeah, they think about that probably. But like for the rest of the people, like, think about your best ranked players out there, they're not, like, they know it does cripple, but they're not accounting for that in their head in a team fight. Like, oh, I need the beads to King Arthur cripple. That's just not something that goes through a normal person's head when they play Smite. So you can abuse that by using it very, very well. Yeah. Again, it's very important how to get that into your head. Standard. King Arthur stomps on the ground with a heavy force, causing enemies around him to take damage and become slowed. Combo. Red stance. King Arthur charges forward, stopping on first God hit. At the end of the charge, King Arthur releases an uppercut, knocking enemies up into the air. Basically just saying you either stomp and slow, or you knock up the air. Flow duration scales. So it starts at 30%, which when we looked at Surtur, we know that 30% is a pretty big slow. But when you max your 2 all the way up, which, to be fair, that's going to be the last ability you rank up on King Arthur. But when you get there, it scales from a 30% slow to a 40%, which a 40% slow is fucking insane. That is way too much, especially for slowing for 2.5 seconds. See, this is what I'm talking. When you play against a King Arthur, you're looking to beads the stomp, or the knockup, or the ult. You're not considering the swipe or the cripple. Because again, if you beads this, you are fucked by the stomp or the ult. That's why people don't account for the cripple with their beads, because they're more worried about the ult or the stomp. Which is why you need to abuse this when you play King Arthur. You should be looking for the cripples. Like, if you're in your red stance and you think someone's about to dash, or they're about to get away from you, get ready to swipe them. But scaling 30 to 40% slow is pretty strong, especially for 2.5 seconds. Energy gain, all that jazz. Twin Cleave and Blade Storm. Standard, blue stance. King Arthur unleashes 2 cleave attacks while charging forward. Enemies hit by the cleave take damage and have their protections reduced. Yeah. So, they just reduces prots, which honestly I did not know that reduced prots, if I'm being honest. I know they reduced prots. Combo. King Arthur swings Excalibur around him, charging forward and damaging enemies 5 times before winding up a final strike that deals more damage. King Arthur is immune to knockup for the duration. This means that when you are in your 3, you're immune to all knockups. Think of a Wheelix, think of a Geb, think of what other famous knockups are there? Hercules. If you're landing against a Herc and you think he's about to 2 you because you're in that Goldilocks zone where you're in the knockup range, just pop your 3. You're knock immune. He cannot knock you up. So again, that's a niche thing to think about, but that's something you have to think about if you're King Arthur against Herc. If you think you're in that Goldilocks zone and you see him about to use it, or you think he's about to use it, just use your 3. Not only will it give you the movement speed to potentially get out of it, but even if, worst case scenario, you do not get out of it in time, you are knock-up immune, which means you do not have to worry about being knocked up. Obviously, you know, there's other things to consider when you're playing against Herc, but that is one of them for the King Arthur player to think about. Cleave damage, prot shred, 10% prot shred is pretty strong. Spin damage, final damage, all that shit, yada yada. 35 energy. King Arthur wings up a massive jab, charging forward, slightly striking. Enemies hit by this jab are stunned for 1 second. 80 energy. King Arthur charges forward with Excalibur drawn. If King Arthur hits an enemy god, he launches them in the air, unleashing a barrage of 6 attacks, after which he launches them back to the ground, doing damage to the target and any enemy below, which means that for whatever reason, if someone is sitting right underneath your ult, you will hit them as the enemy gets hit down to the ground. This is also telling you how much a jab does, how much each hit of your ult will do, landing damage, and max HP damage. So the landing hit does max HP damage. What's the difference between HP and max HP is, so say it just said HP damage, right? Let's say I was at 50%. Let's say I had 4,000 health, just to get a good number out. Or let's just do 1,000, because that's easier, because it's a base 10. Let's say I had 1,000 health, and the max HP damage was 5%. Or let's just use 100, because that's easier numbers for my brain to work with right now, since I'm fucking sleep deprived. Let's say I had 100 health, and your ult did a max HP damage, so it's at 50. 55% of 100 is 20 damage. So, the big difference between max HP damage and HP damage, the best way to think about it is when it just says HP damage, it takes into consideration your current HP when dealing the damage, which means that ability can never kill you. The landing hit could technically never kill someone if it was HP damage, because it's going off of your current HP. When it says max HP damage, that means regardless of whatever the fuck your current health is, it will always do 9% of your max HP on the landing hit, which means, like, say I was at 8% of my health when I was landing, I would die to the ability because I'm under 9% of my max HP. But let's say it only did 9% of my current health, I would only ever take 9% of my current health on the landing hit. It's a very small difference, but it means a lot in the general balance of the game. But basically, max HP damage is a very strong thing, because this means even if you hit a tank, late game when you're level 20, you're going to be dealing 9% of their max health when they're landing, which isn't a lot, but for a tank to do that is important, because you have to consider, like, obviously, again, you're always going to be going for the ADC or like ADC or mage, but if you, for whatever reason, if you have to ult a tank, being able to do that much damage to them while also taking him out of the fight for, like, how many seconds does it last for? It's, I don't know. I think it's like 3 seconds or something. It's like 2 to 3 seconds. Taking a tank out of a fight for 2 to 3 seconds while also doing 9% of their max HP and damage. It's pretty strong. Again, I didn't learn much off King Arthur because I feel I knew all of that, but the attack, the movement speed, and the slow off Surtur, those are things I did not know. But again, for someone that doesn't play those gods, it's not something that I necessarily have to worry about. I mean, I should because I'm a backliner, but, like, you see my argument. Like, my job is to get the general idea of what they do, and as I get better at the game, I can understand the more niche things that they do, and I can understand, like, how I can play against that better. But your job is to know exactly what your characters do and abuse that to the furthest degree. So, like, I don't even know if there's, like, a complex hunter kit, just because a lot of hunters are pretty basic in nature. I guess the biggest thing that I'll say for Rama is with his astral arrows is, like, those go through walls and they slow by 10%. So let's say you're a tank and let's say you're Surtur and I'm Rama. Like, I can hide around a wall that I know you're trying to hide behind, and I can auto you through it while slowing you, and you can't get to me because you're on the other side of the wall. So, like, that's something I can do as a Rama player to get damage on you before you even get near me. Yeah. So obviously, the big thing is understanding what your character does, while also understanding what the enemy god does. So, like, since you're in solo, you should know what the, like, realistically, the warrior tab, you should know what every ability does. The exact scaling, numbers, cooldowns. I'm not expecting you to know all that, especially anytime soon, because when it comes to cooldowns, that gets a little bit tricky. Even for me, I don't know, like, a lot of the cooldowns. Like, if you told me to give you a number, I could give you a general idea. But basically, the way you want to think about it is, like, in your head, how does that cooldown feel when you're playing with it or against it? Like, let's see, ooh, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like Hebo. Hebo's 1. That's a very, very short cooldown. Extremely low cooldown. You want to talk about a long cooldown? Hades Dash. That is an extremely long cooldown. That feels long. It feels like it takes forever to come up. Hebo 1, very often. Now let's just look at it. Hebo 1 is on a 4-second cooldown. That's before any sort of cooldown items built, which is fucking stupid. Hades Leap, it feels long, but how long actually is it? Well, let's take a look at it. Oh, it's on a 14-second cooldown. 10 seconds longer than Hebo 1. So, you know, a lot of the cooldowns in Smite is kind of like vibe based. You know, it's hard to really memorize the cooldown numbers if you don't play that character. So again, it's just based off vibes. A lot of the cooldowns in kit, like a lot of the warrior cooldowns, are kind of like based around each other, and like dashes in general are based around each other. Another long cooldown dash in the game is Izanami. I think it's like 17 seconds or something stupid. 15 seconds. Yeah, I think it used to be like 16 or 17, but I guess it got buffed recently. So like 15 seconds on that is pretty crazy considering how awful that ability is. Um, yeah. Basically, your job, Bryce, is to memorize what all these characters do. And since you are singling out, I mean, obviously there's other ones like the supports that can play in solo. Like I'm looking at RDO because she's not a support, she is a solo laner. So like RDO, Bake, even though he's really bad, Cerberus, Cthulhu, Jingchen, Sobek, Uzumbo to a little bit of an extent. He's not really a solo laner, but he can be played there. Yorm, solo laner. Ymir, sort of, but kind of troll. Not really a solo laner, but pretty much your job is to memorize the warrior tab and whatever potential guardians could go there. Assassins can be played in solo, but again, this is something you'll learn through time. Really, what you need to hone in on is the warriors, because those are the things you're going to be playing against the most. Obviously, metas come in and out. Right now, guardians are pretty hot with Curse Weaver builds, but traditionally, you need to know what these motherfuckers do. You need to know what they do. You need to understand why they're good. Like, again, we've been telling you Colin and Surtur are very early game gods, and you just accept it at face value. But now that we've read through their kits, you can kind of understand why. Surtur has a stun that can go through minions. He slows people to hell, and he deals a fuck ton of damage with his one, and it deals magical damage. That is very, very early game pressure. Colin basically gets an extra auto attack or two just in pure HP shield off his Berserk at level 2. On top of that, with the AoE off his 1 or off his 2 with the Berserk, yeah, it's gonna make him very strong in the early. Let's look at, I don't know, Amaterasu. Like, why is Amaterasu considered not a good solo laner in the early? Well, it's because her 2 is good lane, is good like sleep clear, but again, it's just her clear compared to other warriors isn't the greatest, especially since she's auto attack based. Like her abilities don't really do much. But on top of that, her passive gives her a ton of stuff, but she can't level it first because she needs to get her 2 level so she can clear wave. So by getting, so like once she hits level 9 and her 2's max rank and she starts maxing her 1 from like levels, I think it's 10 to 14, 10 to 15, 14, something around there. She'll go from getting only 15 attack speed or 9% movement speed and 14 base power to 21% movement speed or 30 power based on what stance she's in, which late game having 21% movement speed as an aura is super broken. That is very, and you have to consider that she's not just giving herself that, that's her entire team. Her 1 is an aura, 30 radius. That's like half of an auto attack radius. It's pretty close knit. 30 units isn't the biggest, but giving your team either 30 bonus power or 21% movement speed with her passive that makes the target have 10% increased damage from all sources, that's very, very strong. This is why Amma is considered very good at shredding objectives, because with her passive and her aura, she can shred objectives with her team very, very quick. On top of that, her ult is just very good in team fights. It's very good. Let's look at another early game god, I guess. Shock. Why Shock's early game good? His axe is on a 10-second cooldown that's relatively short considering how much damage it does and how integral it is to his kit. His passive, after 5 successful basic attacks, the next ability Shock uses costs no mana. So Shock basically never runs out of mana because his passive is pretty broken. And its cooldown is reduced by 2 seconds flat. So your axe is on basically an 8-second cooldown and costs 0 mana, which is very strong, especially in the early game before you have MP5 items online. Even if you lose a blue buff or it gets invaded, Shock doesn't really care about it because, again, with his passive, he just naturally has no mana issues. His 2 scales down in cooldown from 13 seconds to 9 seconds, depending on when you level it. Again, this is basically saying 11 or 7-second cooldown, which is pretty strong. His heal, which helps him lane a lot. This basically says a 13-second cooldown, depending on if you use your passive on it. It doesn't work for his ult, obviously, because that'd be, you know, whatever. But actually, well, the mana would. Actually, would it? I'm assuming it would. Yeah. So this would say 88 seconds, which, you know, is a lot less meaningful than the other ones, but that's why it feels like Shock can spam his 1, because when he starts building cooldown, his 1 is very, very short cooldown. 10 seconds is a pretty short cooldown in Smite. A lot of the cooldowns you've seen in Smite is usually around like 10 at the lowest to like 16 to 18 at the absolute highest. Usually hovers around like 14 seconds. Yeah, 14-second cooldown, 13-second cooldown, 16-second cooldown. Normal abilities are usually around like 14 to 16 seconds, especially for warriors. Like, let's look at a mage. There's a mage got 8-second cooldown, 14-second cooldown, 16-second cooldown. What do we got here? Persephone, what do you got, girl? 12-second cooldown, 13-second cooldown, 15-second cooldown. You can kind of get a general understanding of what the cooldowns are looking like just by reading it. But again, you have to like read the abilities to understand what they do and why. You need to, like, you should know more about the warriors than I do. I shouldn't have to tell you what a warrior does. You should be able to tell me what they do. Like, the fact that I'm just now learning Starter slows to the 3 is pretty crazy. I did not know that. The fact that I'm just now learning Kakulin has movement speed in his 2 is pretty crazy. I did not know that. But again, these are things that you should be telling me because you are the warrior player. Again, initially, obviously, when you first switch over to a role and you first start playing the game, obviously, I don't expect you to know these things. But you've been playing Smite now on pretty much a daily, consistent basis for a year at this point. Obviously, in the grand scheme of things, that's still relatively new. Because again, I've been playing Smite since 2017. That's what? 7 years? Yeah, I've been playing Smite for 7 years. Jesus Christ, I'm old as fuck. But dedicating a year to something, you should at least have a better understanding. Like, I'm not trying to cook you and say you're stupid, you know? Because again, up until we've done this league like a month ago, you really haven't been like thinking about the game at a higher level. But in order to become better at the game quicker and understand the ins and outs of the game, a lot of it just comes down to reading. Like, that ass comes down to reading. Obviously, you got to ask a lot of questions because, you know, it's MOBAs rely on community. The better players answer the questions of the worst players so that everyone becomes more educated and gets better at the game. I have no problem with you asking me a question. But if you're going to play these 3 characters, you need to know what they do, why they do it, and who just gives them a hard time. And again, I don't play solo that often, so like besides like very obvious counter matchups, like Nike counters tier pretty hard. Herc counters King Arthur pretty hard. Same with Amaterasu, they counter King Arthur pretty hard. Other than like pretty obvious ones, like I don't play that lane that often, so like I couldn't tell you really how that matchup works. Like I could think about it in my head, like, oh yeah, that character probably destroys that character. But like realistically, like I can't, you know, I'm not in that lane that often, so like I can't really tell you like, oh, well, this is how you should play this exact. Like I can give you like an idea of like, yeah, this should be what you're doing in my head, but like, you know, character specific stuff, you gotta learn that. It's just how it is. And again, that comes with time. Like, it's not like you're gonna play King Arthur and a Nike 10 games in a row, and for the rest of the time you're like, all right, this is how I'm gonna play against Nike. Like, if you're King Arthur, the chances you play against a Nike is probably like 1 in 10,000, and then you might only get like King Arthur and a Nike like, I don't know, like what, twice, 3 times a year, just if we're going based off pure luck and just odds randomly. But like, if there's a specific matchup you want to practice because you feel like it's a bad matchup for you, like, I don't care. We can sit in a practice range, like, and do our 1v1s, and I will. Obviously, I'm gonna try to win because you're not gonna learn if I don't try. But, like, we can sit there and we can practice your matchups and make, oh yeah, this is probably not a good matchup for you, or like, this is how you should be playing this matchup, yada yada yada. But again, it's just a lot of these like small things, a lot of these very basic things that you're not doing that you need to start doing in order to become a better player. Again, next time before you queue up, I'd probably just sit down and just start reading what the abilities do for the warriors. Because again, the idea isn't to memorize it all. Obviously, perfect world, you do memorize it all. But like, the idea is to understand the general idea of what these characters do and why they're good. Like Osiris. So read what this passive does. Each time Osiris uses an ability, burns a fragment off his body. After losing 8 fragments, comes into spirit form. He may walk through enemies and enemy blockers. He gains additional attack speed, and his basic attacks do not incur a movement penalty, aka haste. This fact lasts for 6 successful basic auto attacks. Basic attacks. Enemy blockers basically is just a weird way of them saying enemy walls. So just through his passive alone, he can walk through like a Bracken wall, Ymir wall. Pretty strong stuff. On top of that, he's getting 2% damage mitigation per fragment. So when he has 8 fragments missing and he's in his pure spirit form, he has 16% damage mitigation and 20% attack speed. That's pretty fucking stupid. 16% damage mitigation is a lot. With his ult, not only does it root them in place, it afflicts them with negative cooldown reduction and prevents them from healing. So not only are you rooting them in place for 0.4 seconds, which, does a good amount, you're applying them for 20% negative cooldown, which is a lot, and you're preventing all healing. Usually, healing reduction is like 40%, maybe 60% with like old Toxic Blade, but with Osiris, he's one of the few characters alongside Serket and now Plush. I think they're the only 3 characters in the game where they have pure 100% anti-heal in their kit. That is extremely... Oh, and Odin Cage. I forgot to mention that. Odin Cage also, in case you did not know, Odin Cage also prevents all healing. Healing reduction, all healing. Very strong. Enemies that leave the ring through or over the water chased by Gungnir. I actually did not know you got slowed by leaving his ult. That's another thing. I did not know that Odin Cage slowed you for leaving it. That's insane. I did not know that. Yeah, these again, small things that you don't know, but really the big picture with Odin Cage is I'm trapped in and I cannot heal. The slow's 25%, which is pretty good. I don't know how I've never noticed that, but regardless. And another thing, enemies inside the ring cannot heal and have their power reduced by 15%. I didn't know this either. Odin Cage is broken. Odin is immune to slows and roots on the... Dude, I'm learning a lot. I did not know these things. Again, read the kits, Bryce. You'll learn a lot. Just read them. And once you understand them, you'll get a good idea of what the fuck to do. I'm getting out of here before my eyes fucking explode and I die of fucking sleep depravity. But yeah, again, big picture, end of the day, read what characters do. Read them. Obviously, at first, you want to focus on the warriors, because again, these are the motherfuckers you're going to be laning against. And obviously, the best way to get the late game is by farming your lane opponent. Because again, you can't really team fight. You can't really learn how to play against a hunter or a mage if you can't get past these guys. Because if you're coming to a fight and you're 10 levels under, you're 4 levels under, it doesn't matter how well you know what these motherfuckers do. You're going to get one-shot by them. So, again, learn how to play against these guys. Because, again, these guys are the guys that are going to be trying to kill you and pressure you out and take all your farm in the first 10 to 15 minutes. Once you learn how to play against these motherfuckers, that's when we can start talking about how to play against these motherfuckers, because this is this is honestly more important. Honestly, this is the more important part of playing solos and knowing how to kill hunters and mages. But you'll never be in a position to kill them if you don't know how to beat these motherfuckers in lane. So, again, that's that. I've been rambling so long, my eyes are about to fucking explode, but I'm gonna get out of here. I need to get away from my computer, my eyes are burning. I'm uploading this, I'm getting off, I'm going to bed, I'm leaving, bye.